Good morning. Today we'll be reading from Daniel, all of chapter 3. But first let us bow our heads in prayer. Heavenly Father, as we open your word, we remember the courage of Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego. Give us the same faith to stand firm in the face of trials, the same trust to honor you above all else, and the same confidence that you are with us in every fire. May this chapter remind us of your power to save and your faithfulness to those who love you. In your name, amen. King Nebuchadnezzar made an image of gold whose height was 60 cubits, approximately 100 feet, and its breadth 6 cubits. He set it up on the plain of Dura in the province of Babylon. Then King Nebuchadnezzar sent to gather the seraphs, the prefects, and the governors, the counselors, the treasurers, the justices, the magistrates, and all the officials of the provinces to come to the dedication of the image that King Nebuchadnezzar had set up. Then the satraps, the prefects, and the governors, the counselors, the treasurers, the justices, the magistrates, and all the officials of the provinces gathered for the dedication of the image that King Nebuchadnezzar had set up. And they stood before the image that Nebuchadnezzar had set up, and the herald proclaimed aloud, "You are commanded, O peoples, nations, and languages, that when you hear the sound of the horn, pipe, lyre, trigon, harp, bagpipe, and every kind of music, you are to fall down and worship the golden image that King Nebuchadnezzar has set up. And whoever does not fall down and worship shall immediately be cast into the burning fiery furnace." Therefore, as soon as all the people heard the sound of the horn, pipe, lyre, trigon, harp, bagpipe, and every kind of music, all the peoples, nations, and languages fell down and worshipped the golden image that King Nebuchadnezzar had set up. Therefore, at that time, certain Chaldeans came forward and maliciously accused the Jews. They declared to King Nebuchadnezzar, "O king, live forever. You, O king, have made a decree that every man who hears the sound of the horn, pipe, lyre, trigon, harp, bagpipe, and every kind of music shall fall down and worship the golden image. And whoever does not fall down and worship shall be cast into a burning fiery furnace. There are certain Jews whom you have appointed over the affairs of the province of Babylon, Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego. These men, O king, pay no attention to you. They do not serve your God or worship the golden image that you have set up." Then Nebuchadnezzar, in furious rage, commanded that Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego be brought. So they brought these men before the king. Nebuchadnezzar answered and said to them, "Is it true, O Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, that you do not serve my gods or worship the golden image that I have set up? Now, if you are ready, when you hear the sound of the horn, pipe, lyre, trigon, and bagpipe, and every kind of music, to fall down and worship the image that I have made, well and good. But if you do not worship, you shall immediately be cast into the burning fiery furnace. And who is the God who will deliver you out of my hands?" Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego answered and said to the king, "O Nebuchadnezzar, we have no need to answer you in this matter. If this be so, our God, whom we serve, is able to deliver us from the burning fiery furnace, and he will deliver us out of your hand, O king. But if not, be it known to you, O king, that we will not serve your gods or worship the golden image that you have set up." Then Nebuchadnezzar was filled with a fury, and the expression of his face was changed against Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego. He ordered the furnace heated seven times more than it was usually heated, and he ordered some of the mighty men of his army to bind Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, and to cast them into the burning fiery furnace. Then these men were bound in their cloaks and tunics, their hats, and their other garments, and they were thrown into the burning fiery furnace. Because the king's order was urgent and the furnace overheated, the flame of the fire killed those men who took up Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego. And these 3 men, Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, fell bound into the fiery furnace. Then King Nebuchadnezzar was astonished and rose up in haste. He declared to his counselors, "Did we not cast 3 men bound into the fire?" They answered and said to the king, "True, O king." He answered and said, "But I see 4 men unbound, walking in the midst of the fire, and they are not hurt. And the appearance of the 4th is like a son of the gods." Then Nebuchadnezzar came near to the door of the fiery furnace. He declared, "Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, servants of the Most High God, come out here." Then Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego came from the fire, And the satraps, the prefects, the governors, the king's counselors gathered together and saw that the fire had not power over the bodies of those men. The hair of their heads was not singed, their cloaks were not harmed, and no smell of fire had come upon them. Nebuchadnezzar answered and said, "Blessed be the God of Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, who has sent his angel and delivered his servants, who trusted in him and set aside the king's command, and yielded up their bodies rather than serve and worship any god except for their own God. Therefore I make a decree. Any people, nation, or language that speaks anything against the God of Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego shall be torn limb from limb, and their houses laid in ruins. For there is no other God who is able to rescue in this way." Then the king promoted Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego in the province of Babylon. Thus far the reading of God's word.
It's quite a story. If you've never heard it before, I imagine that you would be thinking, wow, can you imagine that kind of workplace environment? Yikes. Bow down to your boss's image or that's it. But the reality is that people back in this story, Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, faced death for their beliefs, and people ever since this story happened centuries ago have been facing that same threat. And actually still today, there are people all around this world, this very day, who would also face the exact same threat of death if they did not worship and fall down to another God and to actually reject the one true God that they believe in, the God of the Bible, the God of Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego. And so there's this incredible picture here of God's coming together and saying, there is a story here that we need to see and understand about how we stand up in the midst of a threat like that. But most of us, probably most of us, have either never felt a threat like that to that degree, or we might never do so in our lifetime here in Canada. And so the question is, okay, well, how does that really apply to us? And whether we're facing the death threat that they are, or any other threat to be silent or to be quiet or to not profess our faith or to hide our faith or to be ashamed even of our faith, we face the same challenge as they do in a sense, in that we are called every day to either be faithful to God and do what he wants us to do and be obedient to him, or we give in to the demands and the commands of the people around us and say, do it this way, don't do it God's way. Listen to this, worship this, don't worship the one true God. And this story in many ways is really calling out to us to say, will you make the right choice? Who will you truly worship and serve? And so what I'd like to do is walk you through this story so we can understand what that looks like and how we actually live that out and what will truly motivate us so that we can actually do the same courageous thing that Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego did in standing up and being counted, willing and able, no matter what, to say, I will trust in God and in God alone. And the way we're going to do that is by looking at this story, in a sense, in 3 chapters. The first part of the story, we'll call it the choice. The middle part of the story, the stand. And then the last part of the story, which is not very original, the end. Okay? The choice, the stand, the end. First, the choice. All right, our story begins, you've heard it read, but our story begins with King Nebuchadnezzar making an image of gold. And if you were here last week, you'll know this. If you're not, you'll realize as I share it with you that we've just had a story in the chapter before where Nebuchadnezzar had a dream about this massive statue that had a golden head and then silver and bronze and iron and so on and represent different empires that were to come. And he was described in the interpretation as the head of gold. And now here we are in chapter 3. And the next story is Nebuchadnezzar makes an entire image of gold. This is no coincidence. He clearly, from that dream, is thinking, that sounds like a wonderful idea to have this massive image, but let's make it all of gold and let it represent me in every way. And he does this so that he can call all of his officials and all of his empire together to come and worship it, to really, in one sense, also worship him. And so he calls together all these names: satraps, prefects, governors, counselors, treasurers, justices, magistrates, officials. In other words, if you're in a position of authority in the Empire of Babylon, you've been called to head office, into the plain of Dura, as it's described here, this flat area so everybody could see. And there's this massive image that's unveiled. And then everybody's told, when the music starts, when the band plays, you bow down and you worship. And if you don't, the fiery furnace awaits. Your choice. That's the choice. And as we see in the story, everyone except 3 bow down and worship. Everyone else bows down and worship except for 3. And the question is, why is that? Why is it that once the music starts, everybody is willing to bow down and worship except for 3 guys, Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego? What's going on here? What's really going on here is we're getting an insight into the fact that people are worshiping different gods in this story. There's different worship going on here. There's different gods who are being worshiped here. There's 3 guys who are worshiping one God. Their God is described as their God. They call him our God. And we'll learn more about him later on. And so there's those 3 who say, I'm willing to keep worshiping my one true God, even if it costs me my life. And so they do not bow down. They do not worship. They're not making a big deal about it. They're not protesting against it. They're just quietly refusing to do what they've been told and commanded to do. And so they don't do it. But everybody else does. And you say, well, what's going on here? Well, clearly, everybody else figures that it's not worth dying for. That even if they didn't believe in this image, or even if this image isn't anything special to them, even if they don't really feel like it's appropriate to even worship this image, they're willing to bow down and worship the image because they'd rather do that than lose their lives. And I think it would be very disingenuous of us to look at those people and suddenly snap to a decision or a judgment of saying, how could they be so pathetic, you know? Because if given the choice, I think it'd be hard for any of us to honestly say to ourselves in that moment, if we were in their shoes, that this would be an easy decision to make. And this is their life. It's either bow down and worship or the fiery furnace. And the question is, well, why are 3 guys willing to stand up and refuse to do it and the rest won't? And the reason behind it really is because this passage is trying to show us over and over again that what they're worshiping here is a man-made, created thing. Over and over again, it says, this is the image that Nebuchadnezzar set up. Nebuchadnezzar set it up. Nebuchadnezzar set it up. It says it over and over again. And it's basically telling us there's these gods that aren't real gods. Now you say, well, yeah, that's pretty obvious. I mean, that's why we don't worship those kind of gods anymore. It's why most people at least in our culture, don't have images. They don't have statues that they bow down and worship because they realize they're not real. It's why we don't worship the Roman gods or the gods of Babylon or the gods of the Sumerians. It's why we don't worship those gods anymore. I mean, they had gods for everything. They had a god for the sky and the heavens. They had a sky for the earth and the waters. They had a god for the air that we breathe. They have a god for war, a god for love. They have a god for wisdom, a god for speech. They have a god for everything. And you say, well, why did they do that? Why did they worship those gods? And I think what we need to understand here is that there's something going on here a little deeper that we need to really grasp a little bit more than just saying, well, there's those gods out there of those cultures. Because what we really see is in all of these gods that I just mentioned and all of the things that they represent, what's really going on is the people worshiped in that day in such a way that they said, I have to keep the gods happy. I have to sacrifice or do these right rituals, because if I do the right rituals and I do the right sacrifices, then the God of this or the God of that or the God of this will reward me, and he'll give me what I want. And he'll give me the things that I really need, my health or wealth and success or victory in battle, whatever it is. Those are the things that they really wanted. And so what we need to notice here right off the bat here is that these people are not bowing down to the image ultimately because they believe in this image or believe in even the gods of Babylon. They're bowing down because they want the things they think these gods can give them. They want things that the gods really are just a means to an end to. And if we're willing to think about that for a moment, how different are we? I mean, honestly, how different are we? I mean, so often we say we worship God and we say that we worship the one true God, but how often do we actually treat that God as if he is the God who's really just a means to an end? God, I'll worship you as long as you do this. God, I'll be faithful to you as long as you give me this. God, I will be faithful and I will obey and I will trust you as long as things work out the way I want them to work out. And when we behave that way, when we do that kind of thing, we're really behaving and doing the very same thing the people in this story are doing. We're really saying that the things like our health or wealth or success or victory or position or status or pleasure or comfort, whatever it is that we really want, that we're just using God to get those things, and those things are our real gods. Those are the things we're really worshiping. And when that happens, when we live our lives as if those things are the ultimate things, those created things, the things that we think that we need in order to really live a fulfilled, complete life with joy and peace, if we think we're going to get those things and then we're going to have that in our lives, then we will not be willing or able to stand up and say, I will worship God alone when we are threatened or when those things are threatened to be taken away from us. You see, the truth is that in many ways, this story right away is really asking us, are we willing to make the choice between worshiping the one true God in whom you find true peace, true delight, true joy, true love, true satisfaction, or will you worship created things that promise to do all that but can never deliver? Who will you worship? Who will you bow down to? And everything in our culture today tells you to bow down and worship the almighty dollar. They tell you to bow down and worship position and status. They tell you to bow down and worship pleasure and enjoyment. But what they don't tell you, and what I'm going to tell you, and what we need to hear, me included, is this. You can't take your money with you. You can put it in your coffin, but it ain't going with you. Your health, I don't care how healthy you eat, how organic you eat. And I'm not saying it's a problem, okay? Be healthy. But you can eat healthy. You can exercise every day. You can make sure that nothing bad enters your body. You can do everything to stay healthy and strong. And that's not a bad thing. But if you do that thinking that's going to give you your ultimate satisfaction in life, let me let you in on a secret. You're going to die. Your body will fail. There is no stopping it. No organic food, no regimen of exercise, no pills, no anything else. Nothing's going to stop it. At some point, you will take your last breath. Your body is going to fail. You will get sick and you will die. And yet we worship at the altar of health and beauty and being young and looking young forever. Some of us think, well, I just got to make enough money so I can enjoy life. Just got to work hard enough so that I can enjoy life and I can sit back, I can relax, and I can enjoy life once and for all. And this is what one person said about how we behave and how we live. And it's rather, I think, insightful. It says, man sacrifices his health in order to make money. Then he sacrifices money to recuperate his health. And then he is so anxious about the future that he does not enjoy the present, the result being that he does not live in the present or the future. He lives as if he's never going to die, and then he dies having never really lived. That sounds like us, doesn't it? It's really tempting to be that. And yet this warning that we're hearing from this passage and in this way is that you can fall down and you can worship these gods, but they'll never deliver on what they promise. They can't. They don't have what it takes. Because in the end, all of them will fail. All of them will be taken away. None of them last. And so the story begins with this choice. Who are you going to worship? What kind of God are you going to worship? And it leads us to see and understand, hopefully, why these three guys, Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, why did they choose to make a stand? Point number 2, the stand. Because here they are. They don't bow down. They refuse to do it. And then it says a number of Chaldeans, ironically, these are a group of guys who are actually, in one sense, in the same line of work to some degree as Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego. So most likely there's some jealousy going on here. They're probably actually beneath Shadrach and Meshach in the pecking order of the Babylonian Empire. And they say to themselves, this is a great opportunity for us to get rid of these guys and take their spot. And so it says they maliciously accuse them, and they bring word to Nebuchadnezzar that these three guys, who, by the way, are probably three of the trusted guys, and Nebuchadnezzar would have known them, they bring this word against them so that they will be thrown into the fiery furnace. And they do this by bringing it to Nebuchadnezzar, and Nebuchadnezzar is filled with fury, as he seems to be regularly. He's got an anger problem. And then he comes to see them, and he says to them, look, I'm hearing this report from you. I'm hearing this report from these guys that you're not willing to bow down, but I'm willing to give you a second chance. Let bygones be bygones. Maybe you've done it, maybe you haven't, but I'll tell you what, I'll give you a second chance. When the music plays, if you bow down and worship, well and good. We're all good, no problem. I'll just ignore these guys. You're valuable guys in my kingdom. You've done lots of good work. I'm willing to give you a second chance. That's basically what he's saying. But if you don't, fiery furnace right away. And look at verse 16. Look what they say. Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego answered, O Nebuchadnezzar, we have no need to answer you in this matter. If this be so, our God, whom we serve, is able to deliver us from the burning fiery furnace, and he will deliver us out of your hand, O king. But if not, be it known to you, O king, that we will not serve your gods or worship the golden image that you have set up. You hear what they're saying? They're saying, look, we don't need to do a test. You don't need to start the music. We're not bowing down. It's not happening. We refuse to bow down and worship this image that you have set up. We are not going to serve your gods or worship them. It's a rather startling, in-your-face kind of response. And we see in a moment that Nebuchadnezzar is filled with rage and acts in response. But before you get there, look a little bit more closely at what they're saying. Because when you look closely at what they're saying, you start to understand why they say it and why they have the courage to say it. Because in what they're saying, they're actually telling us about the God that they worship. And they're telling us, in a sense, two things that are very closely related, but they're telling us two major things that are very important about their belief in who God is and why they have the courage to stand. The first one is this. It says in verse 17, our God, whom we serve, is able to deliver us from the burning fiery furnace. In other words, they're saying, look, Nebuchadnezzar, we're not going to bow down to your image and serve your gods because we believe our God is powerful, and he is so powerful that he could save us from this fiery furnace. They don't know how he would do it. They're not saying how he would do it, but they're saying if he wants to, he can do it. He is powerful enough to do it. And so they have confidence and trust that the God that they serve is a God who is powerful enough to keep them from that fiery furnace, to save them from it, to deliver us from the burning fiery furnace. And so there's this one sense that they are trusting in God. They have confidence because they know he's powerful and they know he can save them. But then it says this, but if not, be it known to you, O king, that we will not serve your gods or worship the golden image that you have set up. You hear what they're saying? They're saying, look, we believe God's powerful enough to save us. No doubt, he can do it. But even if he doesn't, we're not going to bow down to you. And the question is, why not? Why would they trust God whether he saves them in that moment physically from death or not? And the answer really, in one sense, I believe, is found in the second part of what they say in verse 17, where it says not only that he can rescue them, deliver them from the burning fiery furnace, but he says, and he will deliver us out of your hand, O king. And really what they're saying is, look, Nebuchadnezzar, I want you to understand something about us. We trust in a God who is powerful enough to save us, but we also trust in a God that we believe is so great and powerful that when we understand who he is and what he is like and how we owe him our worship and how we ought to be obeying him, that he is the one true God, and to ignore him, to worship anybody else, to obey anybody else is actually so dangerous to do, because the fire that you are threatening with us, this physical death that you're threatening with us, is nothing compared to the fire and the judgment that God actually, rightly so, would give us if we are to not worship him and not obey him. You see, that's what they believe. That's what they know. And if you're not clear what I'm saying, this is what I'm saying. I'll make it as clear as I can. They're basically saying there's worse things in life than dying. Do you hear that? There's worse things in life than your physical death. We live in the most comfortable culture this world, this entire earth in all of history has ever seen. And I think deep down, we all think we're going to live forever here. You're not. And there's something a lot worse than physical death. And guess what? Every single one of us, if we're left to ourselves, is going to face something worse than physical death. And what we would face that's worse than physical death, that's worse than being burned alive here on this planet, is to actually stand before God and experience the fire of his judgment. Because that's an eternal judgment. And there's no coming back from that. There's no way that you can escape it. There's no life you could live good enough on your own that you could stand before God, because all you would receive from him is this just judgment, which would be his fire of judgment, his eternal judgment on you. Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego know this. They understand this. And they've put their trust in God because they know that as they trust in this God and as they accept the fact that he has every right to judge them, they also believe that he is a powerful enough God to be gracious and to be merciful to them, to actually take that fire of judgment away from them, even though they deserve it. And because they're trusting in that kind of gracious, loving God who is slow to anger, filled with compassion, a God who is filled with loving kindness, that this God is the God who says that when you trust in me, I will take away that fire of judgment, that eternal fire of judgment. So you need not fear anything else. So Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, in one sense, are saying to us today, God can rescue you from whatever circumstances you face. He can. He's powerful enough to do it. But what you need in order to stand up and to be courageous and to stand for him no matter what you're threatened with is to know that he's actually the one who's taken away a fire of a judgment in your place for you. You need to understand that what this story is doing is actually pointing us forward to another event that would happen centuries later. It actually points us forward to another person who would have a choice. A person who would be alone, in a sense, in a garden. And as he was alone in a garden, he was agonizing over what he was about to face. And what he was about to face was not a fiery furnace like Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, but he was about to face this exact fire and judgment of God itself. And he saw it coming. And it sent him into the depths of despair and soul-crushing weight. We're told that he was bleeding, in the sense, drops of sweat were bleeding out of his head, out of the stress of seeing what he was about to go through. And he pleaded with God. This is Jesus in the Garden of Gethsemane. He pleads with the Father. He says, Father, let this cup pass from me. Let this fire of judgment pass from me, but not my will, but your will be done. Do you hear what he says? He knows he's about to take the fire of judgment. And he has a choice. Do I stay obedient? Do I do what the Father has planned from all eternity to do in order to save these people who require and actually deserve this judgment? Do I go through with it? Do I go to the very end? Do I pay the very price? Do I go and take that fire of judgment in their place, or do I walk away? And what Jesus decides to do in his grace and his mercy and his love, in the agony that he knows is coming his way, in the judgment he's about to take upon himself, what Jesus does is he willingly keeps going to the very end. He does exactly do that. He takes the very fire of God's judgment, the eternal fire of God's judgment that should come on you and on me, and he willingly takes it in our place. He takes it in our place to such a degree that just like these three guys who came out of the fire and didn't even have the smell of smoke on them, when we trust in Jesus, we are so completely forgiven, so completely righteous in God's sight, so completely freed from this fire of judgment that in one sense, that fire of judgment doesn't even smell on us any longer. But it's been completely taken away by Jesus and what he has done when we trust in him. That's why these guys can stand. That's how you and I could stand when we see Jesus doing that for us. When you see Jesus taking that fire of judgment in your place, then you will have courage. Then and then alone will you have courage to face whatever threats might come, whatever embarrassment there might be for standing up for him, whatever consequences there might be for being true and being faithful and obedient to God. No matter what people say, no matter what people do. You see, then, when you see that God doing that for you, Jesus taking that fire of judgment for you, then you realize there's no one more worthy of worship than he is. There's no one more worthy of everything that we are and everything we have than he is. And that nothing in this world could ever love us that way. Nothing in this world could ever satisfy us with such grace, mercy, and love that way. No one compares to him. No one. And then you can take that stand. And then you may even at some point in your life be able to say what Jim Elliot said, a Christian missionary to a people group in South America who killed him as he came to share the gospel with them. And before he went on that last trip, he did say these words. He is no fool who gives up what he cannot keep to get what he cannot lose. And that's Jesus. That brings us to the end of the story. And the end of the story really, in one sense, concludes with a warning and an encouragement. Okay? The story ends with a warning and an encouragement. First, the warning. Notice what happens. God does save these guys, right? He saves them by coming into the fire. And there's debate about whether this is the angel of the Lord, this is a pre-incarnate appearance of Jesus, or whether this is an angel. Nebuchadnezzar calls this fourth person in the fire a son of the gods, and then later on an angel. And the text really, in one sense, it's too hard to be completely sure about which is it. But either way, what the story is telling us is that God is the one who intervenes. God is clearly the one who does a miracle. God is clearly the one who saves them. It's a miraculous thing that God does. And everybody sees it, including Nebuchadnezzar. He realizes that the God of Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego has saved them. He says it. Blessed be the God of Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, who has sent his angel and delivered his servants who trusted in him, and set aside the king's demand and yielded up their bodies rather than serve God and worship any God except their own God. He gets it. He sees what they've done, and he sees how God has rescued them, and he gives all the credit to that God. He does. No doubt about it. And that's a good thing. And funnily enough, verse 29, he decides he's going to make a decree that any people, nation, or language that speaks anything against the God of Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego shall be torn from limb to limb and their houses laid in ruins, for there is no other God who is able to rescue in this way. I think it's kind of funny, actually. The God that he's actually providing some protection for, it's like he's got to provide some protection for this God. This God just saved Shadrach and Meshach and Abednego from the fiery furnace, and he basically says, and I'm going to stick up for this God. I'm going to stick up for him because you know what? Anybody speaks against this God, he's going to have to deal with me. Come on, get serious. Who are you, Nebuchadnezzar? And that's an indication of what's going on in his heart, and that's the warning, okay? And listen to this warning carefully. You can have an encounter with God. You can see his miraculous power. You can actually come face to face with a powerful God who does a miraculous rescue. You can see it right in front of you, and you can be left unchanged. Nebuchadnezzar was, and we'll see more of that next week. The same old Nebuchadnezzar still. And that's a warning for us. Please don't think that if you've had some encounter with God where you've seen his miraculous power and you've been impressed with God, that you somehow then are truly worshiping him. He said, well, how do I know? Well, let me go back to something I mentioned briefly earlier on. And we should try this on and make sure we think carefully about whether this is applying to us or not. It's a shoe fits, as they say, wear it. Do we worship God for who he is and what he's done for us in Jesus? Do we worship him no matter what our circumstances are, no matter what's going on in our lives? Or are we worshiping God as long as he does what we want him to do? In other words, do you view God as the God who is great and powerful and sovereign and in charge of all things, and that you basically say, Lord, what do you want me to do? I will do it when you want me to do it and how you want me to do it. I will follow you no matter what. Or do we kind of look at God as more like our assistant in life? Is he kind of the guy, is kind of the guy who comes alongside when we can't make it happen ourselves? You know? Work really hard, try really hard, and when things are kind of falling apart, not going our way, then we better bring God in. And if you want to know whether you do this, just ask yourself, what's your prayer life like? When things are going well, when things are going your way, is your prayer life kind of non-existent? But then it gets revved up big time when things fall apart and go sideways on you? Because now you need God. Well, then I hate to break it to you, but you just might be using God rather than worshiping him. He's just there to help you get the stuff you want when it's not going the way you want it to go. He's just your assistant, not the one you fall down before in worship. See, this warning for us is an important warning. You can believe in God. You can believe that God is powerful, that God can do miracles. You can believe all those things and actually still be worshiping lesser things. And it's only when you see who this God truly is and all that he's done for you most clearly in Jesus that you actually begin to realize that all these other things are just things. And they're not nearly as important as we make them out to be. Because in the end, those will all pass away. And we ourselves will pass away. But he is the God who promises and gives a peace and a joy and a life with him forever. And so if that's you today, I encourage you to think carefully about how you would repent and ask God to forgive you for using him as a means to an end rather than worshiping him as the God who is worthy of our worship no matter our circumstances. And so that's the warning. Second, the encouragement. One of the things that happens at the end here is Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, says in the last verse, then the king promoted Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego in the province of Babylon. And if you go to the end of chapter 2, it says the very same thing, that they were appointed over the affairs of Babylon. They got a promotion then too. This is the second story in a row where these three guys have basically been on the edge of being killed, and at the end of the story, get promoted. Now, I got to be really careful. You got to listen to me carefully here, okay? Some of you might be thinking, okay, so what you're saying is if I just worship God, then I'm going to get promoted. That's not what I'm saying. But it is what I'm saying. Now, what do I mean? What this story is telling us and the one before, and it's actually going to be something we hear over and over again in this book because we want to make sure, Daniel's going to make sure that we're not going to miss it, is this. The real person in charge, the real person who's in control of all things, the person who has all authority and can make things happen the way he wants to, when he wants to, is not you, it's not me, it's God. He's in control. He's in charge. He has all the authority. He has all the power. And he will make things happen the way he wants them to happen. And the encouragement for us is this. He does promise that he will work out all things together for the good of those who love him. Now, in this case, Shadrach and Meshach and Abednego are getting promoted, okay? And you might say, well, does that mean that if I just trust in God that he's always going to promote me and my life circumstances are always going to get better? And the answer to that has to be no. It's not always going to work out that way. But you can trust that this is a God who is in control of all things so that whether he gives you that promotion or not, you can still trust him. Whether he is the God who actually brings the circumstance of your life in line with the way you like it or not, you can still trust him. And the question is how? How can you do that? And we go back to the truth that we heard earlier on in this service. And that's this. The God who is in control of all things, the God who is in ultimate authority over all things, the God who we actually answer to is a God who in his grace and his mercy has taken the very judgment we deserve away from us. And that means that no matter what our circumstances in this life are, we can trust that he's always working them out for our good, whatever that good might be. And let me submit to you that the good that God is most interested in our lives is not how wealthy we are, not how healthy we are physically, but the thing he's most interested in doing in our lives is making us more into the people he wants us to be. He wants us to actually be like Jesus himself. He wants us to be people who live a different kind of life, a life that shows how dedicated in that sense we are to him because we see how precious and beautiful and amazing he truly is. He wants us to live lives where we worship him with everything that we are and everything that we have. In one sense, God is so interested in that because he knows that's for our good that he will sometimes take away all the other things that get in the way. So we finally come to realize that those things are never and could never be enough. Because the greatest good that you can experience in this life is the greatest good that you will experience in the next life, and that is the good of being in relationship with him, of being loved by him, and having him never, ever let you go, because that's what he promises he will do. Because that's the kind of God that Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego believed in and trusted in. That's the kind of God who sent his son to prove that to us, and that is the kind of God who we are called today to come before and to worship him and him alone for his sake, for his glory, and his glory alone. Let's pray. Father in heaven, forgive us for how quickly and easily we can get caught up in chasing after so many other things in this world that aren't going to last, that aren't going to satisfy, that just aren't you. Forgive us for worshiping created things rather than you, the one creator over all. Forgive us for using you and acting as if you're our assistant, as if somehow you owe us or if somehow we deserve something from you because of what we've done. Humble us. Forgive us. Remind us of your amazing grace, mercy, and love to us in Jesus, who took the fire of judgment that we deserved in our place so that we could actually come before you as new people, made new in your image, made to be righteous like your son Jesus, having received that gift as a gift of grace. We ask that you in your grace and your mercy would so fill our hearts, mind, and eye and our soul in that sense with a greater and greater sense of how awesome and beautiful and amazing and full of glory and grace you truly are, that you would be the one we worship more than anything or anyone else. And that as we do, we would find a joy in you, a rest in you, and a courage in you to take the stand when we need to speak the truth in love when given opportunity to do so, to be unwilling to bend the knee or worship anything or anyone but you. Father, fill our hearts with a joy and a peace and a rest from knowing you, loving you, worshiping you, I pray. In Jesus' name, amen.